Hey, Shiva Siddhanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This the founder Acharya, our Lord and Master, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Granta Purina Shri ki jai. All glories, all glories, all glories to the assembled devotees. So now we are continuing. The title of this chapter is The Glories of Devotional Service. Prabhupada mentioned one time, like wherever you open the Bhagavatam, it's sweet. But, just like different tastes, so we have sweet, and some sweets are sweeter than others. So this is one of those chapters that is very sweet. The word translation, Satam, of pure devotees, Prasangat, through the association. Mama, my, Virya, wonderful activities. Samrita, by discussions of Bhavanti, become fit to the heart, Karna, to the ear, Rasayana, easing, Kata, the stories, cut of that, Josana, by cultivation, so quickly, Kata, of liberation, Vartmani, on the path, Shraddha, firm faith, Rati, attraction, Bhakti, devotion, and Krishnashati will follow in order. Satam prasangam mama virya samrido. Satam prasangam mama virya samrido. Satam prasangam mama virya samrido. Bhavaji Hritvara Sayanaha Pata. Bhavanti Hritvara Sayana Pata. Arasana Dasvara Para Parmani. Arasana Dasvara Para Parmani.
Satam prasanghan mama virya samvidho. Karnarasaya kata. Joshanada savapavargamatmani. Bhaktiranukramishati. Satam prasanghan mama virya samvidho.
Satam prasangan mama virya samvido. Karnarasayana kata. Oshanata svapavargavatmani. Asti bhaktiranukramishati. Mama virya samvido.
Discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and attraction becomes fixed. Then, real devotion and devotional service begin. Third point. The process of advancing in Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. The first point is one must seek the association of persons who are Krishna conscious and engage in devotional service. An extremely important point here. So just even have the association of those who engage in devotional service. These are the persons we want to seek out. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. Simply by theoretical knowledge or study, one cannot make any appreciable advancement. One must give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of devotees. Because without the association of devotees, one cannot understand the activities of the Lord. Generally, people are convinced of the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. Because they do not associate with devotees, they cannot understand that the Absolute Truth can be a person and have personal activities. This is a very difficult subject matter. Devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literature wherein the activities of the Lord are described. They think these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees, and by such association, one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. The path to liberation is open, and he is freed. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. Association with devotees means association with the Lord. The devotees who make this association helps the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord, and then being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, he gradually becomes perfect. And read and repeat. In the association of pure devotees, Discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is free, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. Part of the sweetness of this verse is because it's giving very clear and precise instructions on how to achieve devotional service. And it's outlined. The Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And Sukadeva Goswami was a thoroughly realized master of Vedanta Sutra. So consequently, he was also personally realized the commentary of the Srimad Bhagavatam and to show his boundless mercy upon countless bewildered persons who wanted to cross completely over destinies. He recited this Bhagavatam and giving this confidential knowledge. So the perfect process for achieving this Prabhupada said at one point, here and now. During the 60s, that was a big comment. Here and would say here and now. But actually, here and now, perfect process. It's recommended in the Bhagavatam, and it was uttered by this great authority, Sukadeva Goswami. So by hearing and glorifying the Lord, all the person's activities become molded into spiritual activities. And then the conception of material mysteries are completely vanquished. So the hearing and the chanting is very precious for our devotional advancement. And it begins through the association of devotees. You're not going to hear the hearing and chanting we're talking about is a glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, so much hearing and chanting, go to any old football game, and you're going to hear a lot of chanting, So we're referring for us, hearing and chanting means hearing and chanting about Krishna. And, everyone is anxious, or hopefully slightly inclined to achieve the highest perfection in this particular activity. Every morning I have a coughing spell. It's gonna happen, and I was hoping, usually it's a little earlier. I was a little nervous today, it's gonna happen pretty close, but I didn't have it earlier. Yeah. You open it.
Yeah.
So, the pastimes, she told me something very exciting, and I will probably, I might show on it. I think so. So the pastimes of the Lord are executed in cooperation with his pure devotees. And the pure historical incidents that are mentioned in the Bhagavatam are related to Lord Krishna. So as such, the Bhagavatam is known as the Brahma Samhita because it's the sound representation of the Lord. Just like the Bhagavad Gita spoken by the Lord, Bhagavatam is the sound representation of the Lord because it was spoken by an incarnation of the Lord about the activities of the Lord. So in this verse, it's giving us indication how to get over the tendency of impersonalism. So Prabhupada explained, we're specifically interested in Atma Tattva, means the soul. And he described this Atma Tattva as the science of God and the soul. And to understand Atma Tattva, one has to become the opposite of materialistic persons whose only interest is sense gratification or mental speculation. So for those who are actually really interested in the real Atma Tattva, they are busy active Krishna consciousness, as was pointed out here in the first instruction. That the first point is one must seek association of persons who are Krishna conscious and engaged in devotional service. That's what's meant by busy. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. It's mentioned just in the verse, it's simply by this theoretical knowledge or study. Again, you cannot make appreciable advancement. So one of the first steps is giving up association of materialistic persons. And seek out the association of devotees who are engaged in devotional service. So our aim is how to become fully Krishna conscious, not just a little bit, not just a little knowledge. The first step, the basic entry, you're not the body, the spirit, soul. But that's just, a very partial, it's a beginning. We want to be fully Krishna conscious. We want to engage in devotional service because that means direct interaction. And our examples of the six Goswamis, Vishnupa, Sanatana, Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva Gopala, Dasa Raghunath Goswamis. So we're followers of these Goswamis. And these Goswamis, they're not hereditary Goswamis who make a profession of being Goswami. They are real Goswamis. And so for us, when we speak about the Goswamis, we mean these 6 Goswamis. So the example of how one can become interested in Atma-tattva is given by these 6 Goswamis. Rupa Sanatana Bhattaravana Sridhara Gopala Bhattadasa Prabhupada. And so Prabhupada commented, members of ISKCON must become followers of these 6 Goswamis. So first qualification is sense control. It's Vajravegam, Krodavegam, Udaravegam, Upasthavegam, Manasavegam. So mentor instruction. In this way, the 6 kind of urges, these urges for the talking, anger, mind, the belly, stomach, genitals, must be under control. In material life, it means these 6 senses are forcing us to remain in the material atmosphere. But a Goswami means one who has control over these 6 senses. And as soon as we practice the urges of the senses, then we can become Goswami. Prabhupada said that is the definition of Goswami. So we should anchor after the examples of these 6 Goswamis. And Prabhupada, at one other discussion, he was saying, everywhere is Vrindavan. Wherever there's Krishna's temple, Krishna Sankirtan, that is Vrindavan. Once in Melbourne, Australia, on a morning walk, there was there was a nice park. I went there, devotees took me, and probably like taking, walking there. But if you got there a little too late, you would kind of hit the morning traffic, rush hour, and then there would be all these car horns. So, Ramai Swami, he wasn't Swami at the time, Ramai Prabhu at the time, he kind of was apologizing, how annoying all these car horns were, and Prabhu said, oh, I'm in Vrindavan. And he was like, with these car horns, I'm in Vrindavan. Same way when he was living in this little place temporarily on the Bowery in New York City. So now the Bowery's been gentrified. It's like first class place to go and eat and hang out and, super clean, super safe. But at that time, it was really dreadful. And it was just known for drunkards. They would be lying on this passed out drunk on the sidewalk, passing stool and urine in their pants because they were just unconscious, ghastly situation. Prabhupada had to come down and quite often step over these individuals to find out. And we were being, I wasn't there because I was in New York early before. But, in general, in our early investment in Krishna consciousness, we were quite dull because we were kind of used to these things. So we weren't seeing initially how awful this is. And gradually, the waking process comes and the devotees were aghast. Oh my God, we're so sorry. So, he says, why is that? And they're saying, well, he goes, I'm simply in Vrindavan. It takes a really high level of consciousness to understand that. We prefer this kind of Vrindavan. But still, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, my mind is always in Vrindavan because he's always thinking of Krishna. He's Krishna himself. He's teaching us. So anywhere we live, if we're following the instructions of Krishna, then that's Vrindavan. Wherever we live, it's not by the outward practicing. Last night we were really in life. We were really in Vrindavan. And it's just such an exquisite darshan, So obviously it helps to have this type of visible scene that can attract our unfortunate senses and lift them up. But once you're on the highest level of purified consciousness, you're seeing Vrindavan in any situation. So this is what we're trying to do, understand, follow the six Goswamis. Vrindavan was excavated by the Goswamis over time from Krishna's departure from this planet. Things had gotten covered over and places of pastimes were lost. Lord Chaitanya, he said to Goswamis, Sanatan came first, and the Goswami, the other Goswamis, Jiva Gopalabhata, Ramdalas Das, we all joined together for executing the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ultimate teamwork. Because each one of these Goswamis, in their own right, were powerful acharyas. And they weren't like, status. Well, I'm the, no, it was like they were there as a humble team to serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For the excavation of these pastimes and writing books about Krishna, his pastimes, his leelas, high level of spiritual understanding books to excavate the forgotten places, the Krishna pastimes. Very, very high level orders, and they're perfectly executed by these Goswamis. Even Srila Prabhupada, he left behind a trust in Mayapur, specifically to locate and rehabilitate the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there's many places now in West Bengal associated with Mahaprabhu that have been totally deteriorated, even lost, just like the birthplace of Mahaprabhu was lost. It wasn't until Bhaktivinoda Thakur discovered the actual place. So many places like that, and also temples that have been just neglected over time. So Srila Prabhupada, following in the footsteps of Mahaprabhu, we made a provision to save these places from prosperity. So Goswami means 24 hours a day engaged in Krishna Kirtan in this way or that way. So this Prema, Ritambo, Nidhi, they were merged in the ocean of Krishna prema. So unless we've got this Krishna prema, love for Krishna, how can we expect to be remain in 24 hours a day engaged in Krishna's service or even remembering Krishna? So therefore, these activities of service of kirtan are important. But those who haven't developed, love, we should make time. We can't expect to be 24 hours a day in Krishna's business. Therefore, we need to make time in our lives to be absorbed in Krishna's business. And then Prabhupada commented, he was, the period we sleep is therefore wasted. Now, once you get fully absorbed and you're chanting your whole life, Srinata Pisani Chikana, what is the last line? Yes, Ahari, always remember that even in your sleep, you're going to be remembering Krishna. I think anybody who's like going to, let's say a Rath Yatra or, a big festival, especially Rath Yatra, because the whole day is such an absorption in chanting and seeing their lordships, that it's not unusual at night that you're still, even in your sleep, you're still hearing the kirtan. So Krishna gives us a little indication, it's possible, you can do this, So the Goswamis are an example. They had conquered over their senses. They weren't sleeping more than 2 hours, at most 3 hours a day. Because Nirada, Nida, Viri, Pura, Kadi, Vichato, these Goswamis, they conquered over these things. But Ahara means they were giving, eating, or collecting. General Prabhupada said, really eating. And this Nidra, sleep. Some people have a really hard time sleeping nowadays. In general, it's just that you just like in crisis all over, people having sleeping trouble. But one way is a good way to get people to sleep, start a Bhagavatam class, and pull out your beads, So, we need to work on these sleep, put time aside, just sit and chant. So our policy should be, instead of becoming servant of the senses, we have to become servants of Krishna. And this is the Goswami. Because unless we conquer over our senses, the senses are going to be our order carriers. They'll demand, please eat, please sleep, please have sex, please take this, please try that. And so this material life is subjected to this dictation of the senses. Narottam Thakur, he said, Grike Bhavanate Take, Halvaranga Bhavite Dake. So this Halvaranga, always chanting Nita Gora, Nikita Gora. And such persons may be sannyasis, they may be grihastas, it doesn't matter, because always absorbed in the thoughts of Nitai Gaur. And Narottam was always desiring the association of such persons. And he wanted such a society, and therefore this ISKCON, this is the intention to provide the association of devotees who are actively engaged in Krishna service, so that when people come, they will experience a different atmosphere and become attracted to Krishna. When the Goswamis were in Vrindavan, they were popular with everyone. If there was a quarrel, people they quarrel back then, so they had a quarrel. But what would they do? They'd go to they didn't go to the internet. Of course, they didn't have the internet, but they would go to Sanatana Goswami. Sir, there's some disagreement. You settle that. Sanatana Goswami would give his judgment. You are wrong. And that's it. They would accept it. So we can become, the ordinary persons, they weren't necessarily stately, but they were devoted to Sanatana Goswami. And because of that devotion, they accepted his judgments, they accepted his instructions, and their life was successful. They would abide by his orders. And because of that, they actually also became liberated. So we can become this Jira, this Adira, the ordinary man. Prabhupada said we should call him, give him prashadam, treat them very nicely. And just hear Hare Krishna. You come here, chant Hare Krishna, take prashadam. Devotee care is like a big thing nowadays. But we can see these Goswamis, they were practicing it on a daily basis. And they were very dear to all people. Just practice the examples of the Goswamis. Just like when we walk, people will recognize us. They'll say, Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada said, that's offering respect. So if these ordinary people offer respect to a Vaishnava, then we become fans. By seeing us, they will give respect. So what does that mean? That means we have to keep ourselves clean, nice Vaishnava, some Vitimala Tivak, some Sika, something recognizable, so that people will act, oh, Hare Krishna, or they'll say, oh, ISKCON Hare Krishna, So we should endeavor to be recognizable by both our dress and our behavior. We're soldiers in Mahaprabhu's spiritual army. And the soldiers dress in a uniform in order to be recognized. So our Vaishnava attire isn't mundane. It's an act of compassion for those seeking shelter and relief from Maya, but we identify ourselves clearly as Vaishnavas. Just like when Srila Prabhupada was walking down before there was any movement, not even a little temple, nothing. He was walking the streets of New York, and Mr. Howard Wheeler, who became Howard Wheeler, noticed him. You're from India. And then the conversation took place, and it was discovered that, he found out that Prabhupada had come to America on a scheme of this movement trader called the Jaladuta. And it just so happened that himself and his friend had also gone to India on a boat, cheapest way to go, and that boat was also the Jaladuta. And other incidents, just like Lalita in Columbus, he's a hospice doctor, and one day she went in the room and there was a new patient go in. And, it's normal, the lights will be kind of dim. So she went up and there was a person sitting next to the patient. And she leans over and that person goes, "Oh, are you Hare Krishna devotee?" She saw the Kunti Mala. And it turned out that that person in that bed who had been airlifted to this hospital was a Prabhupada disciple. It turned, and that very next day, guess who was coming? It was Radha Muslim. So she got to meet him. We don't know. We honestly, we don't have to carry a sign, but just some indication of what more than a tilak. There's a famous story of Jayananda's mother, so we all know Jayananda, I think, and so another hospice nurse. And she was a super young devotee. She'd just been initiated by Chandramauli Swami. Her name was Wendy. And she's going into this one patient. She had this habit. She kept a little thing with gavajal and some dried tulsi leaves. And she just had it with her just in case. And otherwise, not usually in the hospice, there's not too many people there. It's, the families, people don't know how to be comfortable around death and dying. So, not so much family would be there. So she was basically the only nurse that should be there, kind of interaction with other humans. And if nobody was around, she whispered the Hare Krishna mantra in their ear. And so you notice this one lady really seemed to respond. She didn't say anything, but she was like, something about that mantra, she responded to it. So she's going to work this one day. She's walking out the door of her apartment and she hears a voice in her head because she lived alone. Put on tilak. And she's, what? I'm going to work. And she starts another step. Put on tilak. Then she tries a third step and really authoritative. Put on tilak. And she just like turned around. It was like being in a trance and walked back and put on tilak. And now she's going to work and she's thinking, I'm going to work in tilak. But she did have a good deal, but she decided she'll check on this old lady. And she opens the door and the whole family was there. So that meant, she was going. And they look at her. And then the daughter goes, "Oh, are you one of them? My brother was one of them. And last night I was praying to him to send us a sign because we don't know what to do." And then the other brother was there and says, "Last week I was in South Africa and there was this huge parade on the street with these big carts. And my brother's picture was on the cart." So this lady was the mother of Jayananda. And just like Krishna doesn't forget his devotees, he doesn't forget those who are associated with devotees. And he arranged that this person would be there at this critical. The devotees had been keeping contact after his departure, but somehow, like as things do, they kind of lost contact and couldn't find her. But Krishna didn't forget her. But if she hadn't done that, it would have been an opportunity wasted. So how many times? I remember one time on one of my cross-country trips, what I would do during the Rath Yatra Festival, we were sitting in this little town in Northern California. To walk on. Somebody walked by and, "Oh, Hare Krishna. Hey, where are you people? What's going on?" They were so happy just to see him devotee. Important thing. So another thing is Vaishnavas are not envious. Vaishnavas' only business is to see people and give them Krishna consciousness some way or other. The whole world is suffering from the material disease of life. So, always unhappy. So Prabhupada said, let us preach this Krishna, no, Sri Bhakti Siddhanta, let us preach this Krishna consciousness. We should try to save at least one man, one person. What was his vision? Recently, there was this big billionaire, and he committed suicide. Just like within the last month, he committed suicide. He had this elegant office filled with works of art, each piece worth several $million. Yet this man was not happy, and he shot himself. You know. Rupa Goswami, Nero Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu, he was quoting for so many Vedic literatures, he was giving evidence. Just wonderfully, people would take it as truth, one given proof in reference to the Vedic literature, this Guru Sada Shastra. And we were taught like that too. Nowadays, there's so much, contamination in the air that even devotees are not accepting it, they'll challenge. They take the evidence from their minds and their senses. This is not the method. Formerly society wasn't so degraded. So as soon as you gave evidence from Vedas, they would accept. Now even people will argue against Srila Prabhupada instead of trying to understand his instructions. So those swamis, they were making research from the Vedic literature, from the Puranas, from the Vedas, from the Vedanta Sutra, Upanishad, Mahabharata, Srimad Bhagavatam, Samaveda, Rigveda. So in the Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu is filled with evidence. Shastra, Vicharaneko, Nikanos, and Samstapako. And another purpose by the Goswamis too is to establish real religious principles. So religion means following a system that one becomes a great lover of God, our Krishna. That is religion. So simply doing welfare activities for the people in general, the real welfare is to give them Krishna, Lokanam, for everyone. The human life is a chance. It's a chance given by nature that in this life we can make a solution to birth and death. As Dhamma-Ritu Jaravedi. So that's this Lokanam Hitakarana, the greatest benefit to the human society is to stop the repetition of birth and death. And that was the business of the Goswamis. People are thinking, we've had here so much experience with cancer, for example, so we've got to stop cancer. We have to stop repeated birth and death because not cancer, something else. This is a material world. It's not free from repeated birth and death, and that is the real freedom. When I say in this verse, thereafter you'll be free from repeated birth and death. And the Goswamis were giving us those important instructions. And this verse is giving us how we can do that. And because they received the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Kripa Bharati because they got the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were able to lessen the burden of the material world. So if we study particularly these 8 verses on the Goswamis, this one, and follow in their footsteps in our life, will also become successful. It will be Goswami life. And the people, they'll become to be really attracted to the Hare Krishna movement. And that means we'll become successful. So that's the version in the ultimate teachings in the Bhagavatam. And we have received the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, Senapati General Sri Prabhupada. The spiritual master is our ever well wisher, and we know very well how Prabhupada letters, it's from the spiritual master is our ever well wisher. Therefore, it's not enough simply to serve him with awe and reverence or distance. Instead, we must serve him with firm conviction and love, and then only will we attain perfection. The spiritual master is more important to us than Krishna. How can that be? Because without that connection, we're not going to get the connection. Srila Prabhupada in December of 67, he wrote one letter. Although officially I am your spiritual master, I consider you all students as my spiritual master because your love for Krishna and service for Krishna teach me how to become a sincere Krishna conscious person. My grace, Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Actually, one time in a interview, was in Delhi, to the reporter, does it ever happen, Swamiji, that some of the disciples of yours may disagree with you in spiritual matters? So one of the devotees, Mr. Krishna, said, no. And Prabhupada said, some devotees disagree. Prabhupada said, unless he's a fool. And then he said, unless he's a damn fool. They did not. They never did. Right here laughing. So if he's sober, sane, open-hearted, then he'll agree. Yes, my grace, Prabhupada. Jai Sattva Swami, Jai Srila Bhagavatam. If anybody has any points or questions?
Thank you so much, Malti Prabhu. Such a hope-giving class. This is one of the most hope-giving classes. A couple of the pastimes which you shared. Very, very inspiring. And I'm trying to understand one particular sentence in the translation. Prabhupada usually use the word bhakti as devotional service, but in this particular translation, Prabhupada used both devotion and devotional service.
You said real devotion
And
and devotional service begins. You can't have devotional service without devotion. And it has to be real, not some, outward display. That's why I use that word real. It's an internal thing. Well, externally, maybe you're doing this or that, but the internal thing, that's the real. That has to be there, and when that's there, the devotion experience begins. So, we're in the practicing stage, and we have to keep on. And it's, just like anybody who's learned to ride a bicycle, you fell down a few times, right? Pretty soon there you were, whizzing along. So, it's always it's a gradual process. And when you think about it, we don't know no idea how many lifetimes we've spent before we came in contact with the Holy Name. And this may not be the first lifetime, because Siddhanta said it takes about 4 lifetimes. Once you come in contact with the Holy Name, it takes about 4 lifetimes for the process to mature and be effective. So, we can see there are some very many advanced devotees, where did these people come from? But they were sent by Krishna to help by Lord Chaitanya. And they have had a previous association, previous contact. Prabhupada actually told us that all of you were part of Lord Chaitanya's movement, back in that time, but you didn't finish your job, you didn't finish your business, so we're getting the opportunity now. So that's always going to be the case. We'll just be the devotees, in this time, definitely one of them. Probably you'll see me around in some form soon. I'm just a little wherever I take birth, I hope it's around here so I can have the association of all of you. But there's again no loss of ammunition. A really major point to understand. But at the same time not to abuse it. I can be a little slack because I'll just pick up from where I left off. Well, you don't know where you're standing really, and it's important to know where our feet are. There's one purport in Bhagavatam refers to that. We have to consider where we were before we started this. So, because sometimes people also get a little discouraged, like I'm not making advancement, but then if you go back to, well, when you first walked in the door, you can see, oh, wait a minute, I have changed. You know. Having to keep trying in the association of active devotees. Active means actively engaged in Krishna service. Hare Krishna. You want to add something?
Thank you so much. Just that point you were saying, how all the Goswamis were always united in the service, and
Yes.
they're not trying to cross over saying I'm senior or I'm junior.
They were, I mean, from early on, I mean, like almost day one, they were our heroes. Now, initially, we kind of misjudged things like, okay, we're only going to sleep an hour, 2 to 3 daily. We'll just take that teaspoon of buttermilk. You know, that was a little over our head. But their practical activities of always being engaged and their unification through service. So when we went to the UK, I mean, we were not advanced people at all, but we were focused on the mission and we didn't let anything come in our way because we knew what our orders were. We knew what we had to do. And we knew by their example that they were successful because they remained united, and now the word teamwork is being used, you know, but they were a real team. And each one of them in their own right could have had their own movement. But as servants of Malti Prabhu, they united to accomplish so many wonderful things.
I pray that I play the card of being united.
Thank you all.
Sorry, I just had one small question on the point which you shared. You shared about when we see, how far we have grown in the spiritual life. We also hear the other line where Jesus Christ says, either you be a hot or you be cold. Don't be a lukewarm devotee, otherwise I'll pathetic. So the problem is, we see that we've grown up, but at the same time, we don't want to be the cold, we don't want to be the lukewarm, we want to go towards being hot. How do we make a balance saying that I don't go back to lukewarm and I just stay in that zone, I just go and move towards that zone?
Determination, enthusiasm, and patience. There's no other way. Prabhu said, if any one of those three are missing, then you won't be successful. And actually, the hardest part for most people who are trying to be actively sincere is the patience part. Krishna. Thank you all very much.
And raise Malti Prabhu ki
Jai!
I just want to make a mention, this is a practical point, but when I was trying to I had asked people to move the turn over there so you could come and you wouldn't have to turn around. So you're coming, your left side by Prabhupada, you offer the flowers and then you make your obeisances left side. Now, I know if there's a big, huge amount of people, then you've got to kind of move along. But today there was not a huge amount of people. And some people were, offering the flowers and then I saw one devotee literally run. But without making obeisances, people aren't making their obeisances. So, I mean, this is part of the process there, and I mean, practical example in an initiation ceremony in Vrindavan. One of them, they'd forgotten one person. She was in the kitchen. They called her. So she gets her beads, and she starts walking away, and he calls her back. Not only did he call her back, but he goes like this, like, she starts making little steps, So making obeisances is part of the process of service, part of the process of devotion. It's something you should walk away and go somewhere out of sight and unseen, And if you want to, this goes for the women as well. So, if you have to make room for others, take a couple steps, but you just like walk away somewhere else. It's not really the way it's supposed to work, I just would like to mention that. And the other, I don't know who to say this to, but like sometimes in the morning, the cheddar is covering Prabhupada's hands. And then somebody goes up with the ghee lamp, and how's he gonna like go like, and then they go like this in his face, and it's like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Putting the thing in his, and even sometimes I'll put the ghee lamp right up by his face. So that's not where you put it, and or the hands. So that means his hands need to be exposed during like the Mangalati or the pujas that we offer, and he can. But putting it up on his face and going like that, it's not the way it should be happening, and neither should you do it to devotees. I saw somebody trying to do that today. That's what you're doing, So this is really simple. You take one hand, both hands, but not in the face. Hare Krishna. End of my little for your information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malti. Can I ask you a question? I have some senior devotees, especially when we are chanting in between after every rounds. Some of us chant Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, some of us chant.
Have you heard Prabhupada chanting? Have you heard his speech? What does he do?
We continuously chant.
Yes, okay.
Yes,
Nothing wrong with that, but we're not following it.
Thank you so much.
But at least it's not I wouldn't say it's expensive, but why not follow the instructions? I think we really do. But we should, at least before we begin, and then 2 minutes. Next thing you know, somebody's going to say between every heart.